Hi friends, welcome back to Building in a Small Town. My guest today is Amanda Severson. Amanda is one half of the husband and wife duo behind Grandview Beef out of Clarion, Iowa. In this episode, you'll hear how Amanda originally dreamed of a career in professional sports, how she went from a small town in Washington State to a small town in Iowa, and how social media has changed their business. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I know you will too. But before we get into the episode, I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for listening and ask you to make sure that you're subscribed on whatever platform you're listening. While you're at it, if you could also drop a quick rating and review, that's a simple, free way to support the show, and it helps others to find the show. Thank you again, and let's get into it. Welcome to Building in a Small Town, where we're talking to entrepreneurs, community leaders, policymakers, and more to find out how they're building things in small towns. I'm your host, Shelby Smith. All right, hello and welcome back to the Building in a Small Town podcast. Today I am on the road again. I'm up in Clarion, Iowa, the booming town, and I'm joined with Amanda Severson of Grandview Beef. And I was thinking about this on the way up here. I think that the very first time we met was actually my first farmer's market in Ames. I think that was the very first time that we crossed paths, was that very first Ames farmers market.
Yes, it was.
And
That's
then,
funny.
I know. Isn't it weird to think about? Because then, I mean, we crossed paths so many other times after that, you know, in the startup world at Iowa State and 1 Million Cups and She Talks with the weirdest, most stressful presentation I feel like I've given over the years. So yeah, I think that was the first time we met, was at that Ames farmers market.
Yeah. And that also, I mean, a first farmer's market is like such a nerve-wracking experience, because you get there and you look around and you realize, dang, like these people have a lot more than I have, and they have signs, and they have tablecloths. And my first farmer's market, we showed up with like just a plastic table, no tablecloth, and a piece of paper with one prices. Cooler of beef and like a wooden sign that said our family farm's name on it, but not the name of our business. And then we looked around and realized, yeah, we're severely underprepared.
But, you know, it's your first one. It's, you know, it's such a learning curve. I can't remember if I told this story on the podcast. My first one, I bought my tent. I came by myself. I bought my tent and I never like tried setting my tent up. So I got it out of the box, and somebody, and I don't know their names, it's Dusty Hill Farm in State Center. The old guy must have just like seen newbie written across my forehead, because he came over and helped me set up my tent. And had he not done that, like, I don't think I would have even gotten my tent set up on the first day. So you were ahead of me. You at least, you know, could get your setup set up. I was without the help of a nice veteran vendor. Would have been screwed.
That's nice of you to say. I don't even think we had a tent. But yeah, I have many a times looked around helplessly for a kind older gentleman who's twiddling their thumbs and wants to help me set up a tent.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them at the farmers market, which is pretty handy. But anyways, okay, so I really want to start your story from the beginning. I know some of it, like I said, we've crossed paths a lot. But you did not. We are in small town Iowa right now in Clarion, but you are not an Iowa native. And are you a small town native? That I'm not entirely certain of.
I am. So I grew up in a town that only had 300 people, and it had a grocery store and a gas station and a hardware store, and that was it. And it was called Plain. It is called Plain. And we had to drive. The nearest town that had like all the amenities was 30 minutes away. So I am used to small town living and having to prep your groceries and all of that, but I'm not used to agriculture small living. So that small town that I grew up in was in Washington State, and it is an agricultural area. It's near the apple capital of the world, so lots of orchards. I went to college in Pullman, which is wheat production central, the rolling hills, but I didn't care about agriculture at all. I had no interest, no tie to it in my family. I just pretty much stayed as far away from it as I could. So Iowa was very different for me.
Very, very different. Okay, so then how do you get from a little tiny town of 300 in Washington State? How do you wind up in Clarion, Iowa?
Yeah. So when I went to college at Washington State University, I knew I wanted to work in the sports industry. So I was somebody that is really passionate about athletics and sports, but always very average. I knew I was not going to make it.
And so what sports did you play growing up, though?
It was soccer and running. So track was where I succeeded the best. But again, like not even to the level where I would compete at state. You know, I would just sometimes win races and people would get excited and then that was it. And so I wanted to be in the athletic world, but knew I wasn't good enough to actually play. And so I started to get internship experience at Washington State working for athletics. And I was working for the football team, the baseball team, and also just learning a lot about like hospitality and interacting with people. So I worked at the president's office at Washington State and was able to develop relationships with some of the upper leadership. So my goal was I'm going to graduate from college with all this athletics experience and then all of these connections, right? Because we know in that world you have to be connected to get anywhere. And I want to work for the Seattle Seahawks. Like that was my dream because that was my home team. I grew up watching them and I graduated. My degree was actually in communication, which is sometimes considered a laughable degree, but honestly, it was like the best option and choice for me. I'm so glad that that's what I ended up doing because I use it every single day. But I graduated from Washington State and I got an internship with the Seahawks. So I thought I had landed the dream job. And I was doing events and hospitality for them. So essentially making the players and their wives happy through different events and offerings that we did, like a training camp special area for the families, a holiday party. And it was really addicting and fun in the moment because you felt very important. But in reality, like when you step back and look, it wasn't very fulfilling in that you never truly made them happy. I mean, this is like a different level of clientele and they're not connected to you in a personal way. They're just connected to you because it's their job to be. And so it was kind of losing its luster. But at the same time, I met another intern working at the Seahawks. And that intern was from Iowa, and he was working on the turf fields. He was getting a degree in turf grass management from Iowa State. And similar to my story, he wanted to work in the sports industry and had for a long time, and turf grass was where he was headed. And got to Seattle and realized he did not like the city and did not like working for professional athletes either. So you can probably skip ahead and guess that that was my husband, Knute. And we met there and just started talking and kind of trying to escape the city together on the weekends, realizing that we were not fans of being right in the heart of Seattle. And so we would go on hikes or go up to Canada and just kind of spend time together as friends. And then one thing led to another, and it became very obvious that I wanted to be much more than friends. But the plans were squashed when he said, I'm going to go back to Iowa. So he went back to Iowa, and I stayed thinking still, this is my dream job. I am not going to leave this job. And my internship ended. The only job offer I got was to be an executive assistant. And that is just not my personality.
That was not the dream job.
No. And looking back, I'm sure that would have been a path, right? Like there's so many paths we could have taken in life. I'm sure I wouldn't have been in that job forever. It probably would have helped me move up in the organization. All of those things could have worked. But I was really stubborn and independent in that I did not want to be responsible for somebody else's calendar. And even if it was temporary, I didn't want to do it. So I needed another job. And I applied for internships all over the country in sports. and got one with Ladies Professional Golf. They're located in Florida. And I thought, that's where I will go. That doesn't sound so bad. At this time, I'm still talking to Knute in the background while he's in Iowa. And then Ladies Professional Golf called and said, this is temporary job located in Iowa.
Of all places.
Yeah. So that is the long story of how I got here. Many, many doors opened, lots of prayer, lots of going where I was feeling led, and some slaps in the face to just get me to where I needed to be. And moved to Iowa in March of 2016 for the job, not for a boy. No. I would never.
It would never influence.
No, the
never
boy had nothing to do with it.
Okay, so you moved to Iowa. I can't imagine that the LPGA is in rural Iowa at that point. So are you moving to like Des Moines metro area, or where did they have you based?
Yes. So Des Moines was where I was based, and such a fun city to live in. It was one of the highlights of my time, I think, of growing up, is just the time that I was in Des Moines and like learning to be myself in a new state. And Knute was still in college, finishing his last semester, so I was on my own, and we had both talked that I needed to establish myself as an individual in Iowa, not as Knute Severson's girlfriend. So I was having a lot of fun exploring Des Moines and meeting new people. Not so much fun working for the LPGA. And I think that was like what clicked in my head of the sports industry is maybe not for me. We are working 80-hour weeks for minimum wage. It takes 10 to 15 years to even get to a position where you're like going to have a savings account. And it is a very thankless job. And there are 20 people waiting in line behind you for your spot if you mess up. And it was not very much fun anymore. So the job that I was working was I was a sales coordinator for the Solheim Cup. And that Solheim Cup took place in 2017, but I had left the job 9 months after I started it. I did not even make it to the final Solheim Cup. We actually were in Italy getting married during the Solheim Cup, so a much better option in my opinion.
Shoot, you never know what you missed at that Solheim Cup that you spent so many hours planning.
Yeah, I heard lots of great things about it, but I'm okay. I missed it.
I'm sure that you did. Okay. So you leave this, dream path, if you will, 9 months after taking your second internship into it. You have moved to an entirely different state, entirely different region, very different from Washington State. I mean, similarities in some respects. What path do you feel like you need to be on now? Have you officially taken the title as Knute Severson's girlfriend?
Yes. So as I'm trying to figure out what's going on with the LPGA and wanting to leave, I'm getting some calls from the Seahawks. And there's some other positions that are opening up. And I think that was like really the turning point in my life where I could choose to go back to Seattle, or I could like jump head into what I was doing. And I remember very specifically that Knute and I went on a walk in Des Moines, and right next to the Iowa Cubs baseball park, there was a bench, and we sat down and we talked about what was I going to do. And he in no way wanted to stand in my way. If I wanted to go back, he wanted me to go back. But we were also realizing like this was much more than just a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. And so that was the turning point where it was like, okay, if I'm going to stay, we're going to do this thing for real. Like, we're not joking around anymore, and we're going to get married, and we're going to do the whole damn thing. And so I stayed. On the backside, behind the scenes, what was happening was Knute was finishing his degree at Iowa State. There's an excellent program on agricultural entrepreneurship led by Kevin Kimley, who I'm sure many listening to this podcast know. And Knute was going through his class, creating a business plan for a beef business. And he wanted to sell beef to high-end restaurants and have it labeled as his family farm's beef. And so he was creating this business plan, and I love entrepreneurship. I did startup businesses in college. I did business plan competitions. And so I was helping him with all of his homework and writing. And I think Kevin even let me come and sit in a couple of the classes, which is so nice. And so when I decided to stay, I decided to start helping with the beef business idea. And obviously it was not making any money at that time. It was just an idea. And so I looked for another job too and slowly moved my way closer to the farm. So I took a position with Iowa State University and moved to Ames. So now I've gone from like the big city in Iowa to a slightly smaller city, and I'm getting closer and closer to the rural farm.
Yeah. And so what was that position at Iowa State? Were you involved in the entrepreneurship side? Like what was that?
Yeah. And so initially I took a position as, I think the title was assistant marketing director. So I was just doing marketing and events for the College of Business. And it was fine. It was a job, a very safe standard job. But I was really getting more interested in this whole agricultural thing while it was happening. On the weekends, I was spending time at the farm, and all of my assumptions about farming were wrong. And I was learning so much about how complicated the industry is, how challenging all the different roles are that a farmer or a rancher balances. I was learning about all of the misinformation that's in our society about food in general. And I was just like this passion growing inside me that I really wanted to be more involved in the agricultural side of things. And we decided, so I started that job at Iowa State in early 2017, I think. And by the summer of 2017, we were going to our first farmer's market.
So the beef business has launched at that point. Is Knute back at the farm at this time?
He is. He's doing like random jobs because he can't find a full-time job. So we have a wonderful business here called Sports Graphics. They design like the cushions and things for sports. So if you're like at a baseball field and the catcher, I'm so bad at describing this. This is laughable. This shows how much I know. Anyway, they're like the padded things that people run into in sports. That's the basics of it. So Knute was gluing these pads onto wood and doing jobs that were not very fulfilling, but trying to figure out where his next steps were going to be. Then he worked for a co-op for a little while. And I think it was when he was working at the co-op that we were able to kind of start the Grandview beef.
Okay. So talk to me about that. What does the very beginning of that look like? So you're at Iowa State, you're in this marketing kind of communications role for the College of Business. You are starting to learn about the farm. What was the start like with your first few head of cattle? Where did they come from? Talk to me about that.
So we were learning from some meetings with chefs that maybe the high-end restaurant thing was not going to work out. So they loved the beef. Knute went down to 801 Chop House in Des Moines and brought some steaks, and then they cooked it up with their stuff that they already had there and had a great conversation about it. But the reality was that they would not be paying the price that was needed in order to actually make money from this. And they wanted to work with distributors. And interestingly enough, my dad is actually a Cisco food salesman and has been pretty much my entire life. So I very much understand that side, that the Cisco food salesman is there every single week, making those sales, giving them deals, running around getting ingredients for them if they can't find them. Like that guy is working hard to keep that business. And a farmer an hour and a half away who sometimes has product is not the answer. So we realized this restaurant thing is not working out. Let's just go to a farmer's market and see what happens. And so we chose the Clear Lake Farmer's Market, and again, horrible setup, but we went And we just had one beef. It was raised on his parents' farm. Nothing special about it besides that his family had raised it. You know, Knute didn't even have anything to do with raising that one. And it was grain fed. And we brought it to the farmer's market. Pretty sure, to be honest, that we weren't like following this legal standards of required meat sales. But we did it anyway. Don't come after me now. I do follow all the rules now.
Statute of limitations is passed on that one. Don't even think about it.
And people were interested in it. It was like the very beginning of this movement of buying direct to consumer. And the meat, when they would come up and they would ask about it and we would tell the story of the family farm, they were not so enticed by what we thought would be the selling point. They wanted to know if it was grass-fed or grain-fed. Originally, we built this story off the idea that all of the work was done with the cattle on horseback, so that there was never any machinery used. And that was very naive, us not being the ones running the farm, because then when we started to do some stuff, we were like, machinery would be easier.
Super helpful.
Yeah. And it's really not affecting the cattle like we thought, like stress-wise. What stresses the cattle out is something new. So if they're used to horses, then that's great. But if they're used to machinery, then that's also great. So we were kind of learning like our story wasn't aligning. And people didn't really care about the horse thing. They more cared about, is it grass-fed or grain-fed? And actually, the horses would get confusing. Like sometimes people would say, like, wait, so they're eating
is this horse
meat?
meat?
Yeah. Yeah, not an easy story to tell. And so it caused us to ask this question of like, well, we've never really considered grass-fed. But I guess in Seattle, at the markets and stuff that we saw beef at, grass-fed was selling for more, and that was something that was very appealing on the coasts to people, but not really in Iowa. And so it made us question our business plan, and we kind of made a pivot. And I think that story offers a lot of insight for people that are interested in starting a business. And one of the biggest recommendations that I always give people is if you have a product that can be consumed, take it to a farmer's market, because you will learn every assumption that you're making about your business. You will learn every question that people have. It'll give you all that you need to correctly market your business and set you on the right path, because people at a farmer's market are not afraid to tell you what they think.
You will gain so much immediate feedback. Positive, negative, does not matter. They are going to come at you without a filter. So prepare yourself accordingly. But yes, from a marketing perspective and the telling of your story and, hey, what is the actual important feature here? It is invaluable. It's probably the cheapest market research that you could possibly do.
Yes. Yeah. Even if you're not selling your product, which in and of itself, like, there's a big clue for you. If nobody's buying what you're selling and the guy's tent next to you has a line, maybe you should reconsider what you're doing. So we came back after that. So that was 2017. We're not even married yet. We go and we get married after now we have like loans together and we've signed this business paperwork, kind of in the reverse order we were supposed to do. But it worked out.
I can relate. It's fine.
Maybe that's the way successful businesses are built.
Possibly.
So we go back to the drawing board, and now I've moved to the farm. So I've moved from Ames up to the farm, very naively thinking, I've got this. And I had some people that were from Washington who were really negative about me moving to Iowa. People that I considered friends at the time who made statements about my inability to handle this way of life and that I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And those conversations still very much, I remember like every aspect of those conversations today. So when I moved to the farm, I had something to prove, right? Like I had a chip on my shoulder that somebody thought I couldn't handle this. And here I go and I'm going to do it like with flying colors.
Like, what did they think that you couldn't handle?
I think they thought I couldn't handle the work, the time commitment, the uncertainty of it all, you know, like I had no agriculture background to understand a planting season or a harvest season and what that brings, or how to work around cattle. I think the comments were made at the time probably from whatever was going on in their own personal life, right? Like, I think a lot of people want this way of life and see it as this beautiful thing that has a lot of money attached to it, which is laughable to me now. But I remember people being like, oh, wow, you're dating a guy that has farmland. You're going to be rich. I'm like, no, I'm going to be in debt for the rest of my life.
Literally up to my eyeballs.
Yeah. So I think it came from their own personal desires to want to have this way of life. And they just thought I wouldn't be able to handle it. And honestly, it was really hard to handle. Like, I think I fall somewhere in the middle where there was some aspects to what they said that were right. Did they need to say it? No. But was I handling it with flying colors? No. Knute would be the first to tell you that the first harvest and planting season with me was brutal because I didn't understand when he said he was going to be home for dinner and then he wasn't home for dinner. Like, why? And drop what you're doing and come home. No, that's not the way farming works. So I learned a lot about myself with the first year back on the farm. But
And is this the first year of marriage too?
First year of marriage, yeah.
All the fun things just wrapped into one.
Yeah.
Talk about life just kind of smacking you in the face, right?
Right. And I'm like, we're buying our first piece of land together. So we're signing notes for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And here's this girl so I grew up not ever wanting to have debt. My parents had some credit card debt and I just remember realizing when I reached kind of that 18 to 20-year-old range, like, debt is bad. It's been bad for my parents. I'm never going to have that. I'm never going to have any form of debt. And here I am signing operating loans for more than I ever thought
Imaginable.
Right. Like when I was in college, for example, when I started this business, it was a startup, and we had somebody approach us and want to invest $50,000. And at the time, I remember thinking, like, $50,000. If I take that and my business isn't successful, like, oh, paying that back, it's such this huge amount of money. And $50,000 now, it's like just a part of the everyday.
Yeah.
And so the dollar amounts we were working with just increased so much.
Yeah, the magnitude is enough to, make you stop your
Yes.
breath a little bit. Okay, so you are still at this point, you've moved to the farm. You guys have launched your farmers market business. You're still commuting to Iowa State, right?
Yes, driving an hour and 15 minutes both ways. So 2.5 hours in the car every day.
Right. So you still have the stable income. You still kind of have that stable job on one side.
Insurance.
All of the benefits that are quite nice at Iowa State, I hear. So you're doing that. You, on the other side, are signing these loans to buy this land. What was the plan with the land?
Yeah. So 2018 comes around and we decide we need to test out this grass-fed idea. So we purchased 12 steers from his parents. We raised 6 as grass-fed and 6 as grain-fed. And we raised them like right next to each other so that we could kind of examine how it would all work. And we really struggled with the grain-fed. They had vet bills, probably for one reason we didn't exactly know the right feed regimen. So we'll take some ownership in the vet bill, but their bodies were not used to digesting grain because that's not really how livestock were originally raised to eat. They all grew up on grass originally. And so we're feeding grain. We have vet bills with them. They're lazy. They're laying around. Their poop smells worse. I know that sounds silly, but as a girl that didn't grow up on a farm, like that's one of the first things I noticed.
Yeah.
And on the other side, we've got these 6 grass-fed, and they're very active, and their poop doesn't smell, and we're just enjoying that process more. But what really drove it home is we take it to the farmer's market in 2018, and the grass-fed sells out. for $2 more per pound. And the grain fed, we can't find homes for. We can't even sell them as quarter halves and wholes. There's kind of a lot of people in that space, and we end up taking them to a sale barn and losing money on the grain fed. And that's when we really felt like the grass fed is where we want to go for sure. There's the market for it, but also it's just aligning more with what we're good at. I mean, Knute, his degree was turf grass management and horticulture. So the man loves grass. Like his dream job is to grow a big field of grass. And so it was so much easier for us to jump into that and feel in alignment with where we were going than it was for us to think about raising a field of corn. We weren't excited by that. We didn't want to think about having to sell it to the co-op or market our grain. None of it sounded fun to us, and the grass-fed sounded really fun. Also, we both like a challenge, and we loved that people around us were like, what the hell are you doing? That to us just fueled the fire of, let's see if we can get this to go.
Yeah, because you are very much in row crop country. Like
yes.
We are, it's flat as a pancake up here. Like my husband's from northwest Iowa. You go up like all this region, what you guys are doing is just not what is done here. So I can definitely imagine you got some raised eyebrows as you started to make it a little more public what you're doing.
Yes.
So 2018, you buy your first plot of land. You just turn the cows right out on that land, right?
Yeah, I wish. Again, something I didn't know or understand when I started in agriculture. So when we bought that piece of land, we wanted to establish it into pasture. And again, people thinking we're crazy. This is row crop land that has been corn and soybeans, and we rip it up and plant it to pasture. You can't graze it in the first year. You have to wait a whole year before you can graze it. And so I don't think we started grazing that piece until 2019. And that piece of ground we wanted to try rotationally grazing. So we had 2-acre paddocks. We moved the cattle every 24 hours and just tried to learn and teach ourselves, here's this process of raising grass finished beef. Because nobody's doing that in this area, we didn't really have anybody that we could talk to. I mean, his dad has raised cattle for 30 years, and believe me, like a wealth of knowledge. We would not be doing this if we didn't have him to call, him and Knute's mom. We call them all the time and ask questions. But some of that finishing on grass, we would call and ask a question, and they'd be like, we don't know. We've never finished cattle on grass before. And we'd call a neighbor down the road that had cattle. Well, I don't know. I've never finished cattle on grass before. So it was a lot of experimenting to try and figure out what to do. We will admit our first grass finished beef did not taste good. And there's been some customers that have been with us from the beginning, and they're so kind to say that it always tasted good. Like Kevin is one of those. Kevin Kimley supported us from the beginning and bought it. I don't know how. It was not very good, and we have made a lot of improvements since then. But it was a learning curve.
So that first, herd, how many were in that?
So we raised those 6 as grass-fed in 2018, and then we grew by 12 every year. So the next year we purchased 24, but raised them all as grass, and then 36, 48, 60, 74. And this year we're staying stagnant at 75 because the calf prices were crazy this year.
Astronomical.
Yeah.
Like the highest historically, I think. Literally historically the highest.
Yeah. And with inflation and people watching their grocery budgets more, we knew we weren't going to lose customers, but our customers were likely not going to be buying as much beef as they had in the past. So we just wanted to play it safe this year and not grow. So this is the first year that we have not grown.
Since you started.
Believe me, 2025, we're growing.
Okay. So you have these first 6 head of your grass-fed, grass-finished. What, you said it didn't taste as good. Mm-hmm. What would you describe the flavor as?
So it was just very lean. Like the animals were not well finished. We took the same assumptions about how you raise grain-fed beef and applied it to grass-fed. So a grain-finished animal is ready around 14 to 18 months. So we were processing these animals at 16 to 18 months, and they were small. They just were not like live weight. They were around 1,000 pounds. And when they would hang, so when you do processing like this and you're working with a small processor, you dry age your beef, and it hangs in a controlled environment for anywhere from like 7 to 21 days. And dry aging like that, it concentrates the flavor of the meat and makes it more tender. Well, it does that because it has this fat cover that is concentrated down. Ours didn't have any fat. And so it just was like, it was shrinking. The cuts were not big, and it tasted gamey because that aging, it's almost like a mold on the outside, and that was getting right to the meat because there was no protection. And so it was, small cuts, dry, gamey, not good.
Not your best work.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did this experiment of 6 grass-fed, 6 grain-fed. At that point, are you still at the Clear Lake Farmers Market? Is that where you're marketing your beef exclusively at that point?
Yeah, and we added, I think by 2018 or 2019, we added the Ames Farmers Market.
It was 2018.
Was it? Okay.
Same.
Good. I'm glad you know the dates.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So by 2018, we had that other farmers market. And, we were the goal was just to sell stuff locally. At the time, there was some people that we were seeing online that were like shipping their beef nationwide. And that was really appealing to us. But we knew that came with added costs. And if we couldn't figure out how to sell here locally, we were not going to have a successful business. So, when I say locally, I mean in the state of Iowa. We knew, and we still know, that Clarion, Iowa, as much as we love this town, this is not our target market. There are a lot of people here who raise cattle themselves or who have had a connection with a farmer for their entire life, and they like the grain finished beef. And so we're not going to convince our entire town to start buying beef from us, nor do we want to. Like, we just want to find the people who are interested in grass fed. So we wanted to go to places where we knew that would be true. Like a college town has a lot of people that have come in from other areas of the country to work. So we're getting exposed to more people. And then Clear Lake, you're looking at a market with a little bit higher dollar value of spending, and they're there vacationing, so they're ready to spend that money. And those were both good markets for us.
Yeah. Okay. So 2018 is where you add that extra market. You guys are growing your herd at that point. How do you feel like your cowgirl skills are developing by 2018?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. Not well. The reality is I'm still working a full-time job and driving back and forth to Ames every day. And the time that I do have to spend on the business is like late at night, and I'm doing the marketing side of things and the finance side of things. And Knute is really focusing on the animals. There was kind of this turning point, and it came around 2020 when we were having our first child, where I realized I want to know how to do the stuff outside too, because I wanted my children to know that their mom was capable, regardless of gender or background, to do these things. And so I started to take an interest in it, but I didn't even know how to drive a stick shift in 2018. So my ability to help outside was limited because pretty much everything on the place is a manual transmission. And at the same time, at Iowa State, there was this job opportunity that came available to work for a new program that was launching called the Executive MBA. And the Executive MBA was going to be focused for people in food and agriculture. And the faculty member that was going to start that program pulled me aside and said, I'd like you to be the coordinator for this and run this program with me. And it was so exciting because it got to mold both my worlds. Like, I got to learn more about agriculture and make connections in corporate agriculture while still doing my marketing event side that I was very experienced in. And really doing that job, I did that job for, I think, 2.5 years. Doing that job really helped me become more valuable on the farm. Like, suddenly I was bringing information back to the farm that the farm hadn't heard of because I was learning it over here at Iowa State. And that's where that transition started to happen of me becoming involved more outside. But still to this day, I want to make it clear, you have to have defined roles in a business just because time is limited. And also when you're working with your spouse, like, it can get dangerous, right? I mean, you're doing everything together and you're running a business together and you're supposed to love each other at night. And so we have very defined roles. I am marketing, sales, finance. He is operations, and I will give my input on operations. I will brainstorm, problem solve with him. But at the end of the day, he makes the final call outside. I make the final call financially or marketing wise. And we just saw this the other day. Like, he's interested in putting up a new cattle shed.
Again,
we just finished paying off our first one and we need another one. And, he wanted it in a certain spot. I posed some questions. My questions were good thinking points. He's going to think about it. But ultimately, he knows if he comes back to me and says, no, it's going here, that's his choice. And he's in charge of that side of the business.
Yeah.
So there has to be lines.
Yes. So basically when I tell my husband that I am not the one who's going to have the shovel in my hands, no matter how much you want me to have it in my hands, just ain't happening. Yeah. My skills are better elsewhere.
Exactly.
Good. Thank you for that argument. Point. I will use this as proof one day. Anyways, okay, so you're still at Iowa State full time. Mm-hmm. You're pregnant with your first, with Harbor. You're starting to want to get more involved. Mm-hmm. At this point, you guys are on social media. Mm-hmm. The social media, I think, started pretty early days.
It did, yeah.
So that had already started. You had the Instagram, you had the Facebook, you had all the stuff. But as you're starting to, like you said, learn things in this executive MBA program, I assume you're getting some like marketing tidbits here and there. You're getting some operation, like all sorts of stuff. MBAs are broad for a reason. So when did you really start digging into the Instagram thing? Because you guys have seen significant growth over the last few years. Like, you put exponentially more effort into it. So walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah. So around the end of 2019, Knute on the operations side is just continuing to buy more animals.
Spend more money.
Yeah. And my job is to sell that beef. And I'm realizing, like, at a certain point, we're going to tap out our local market here. Potentially just from inability to reach them without paid advertising, and we don't have a budget for paid advertising. But also there's just so many people in the Ames, Clear Lake area that are going to buy grass-finished beef. And
it's not as if you have the manpower and the resources to be at every single other market potential in the state. Like, you are, that's one thing I don't think people realize necessarily with these farmers markets is, like, you might come shop for 3 hours. That is a 7-hour endeavor for us between load, setup, actual market, tear down, go back, unload, all of this stuff. Like, it's not possible for you to add an additional in-person something.
Yeah. And to pay somebody to stand there is, like, you don't make any money.
Right.
Then you're just writing it off as a marketing expense, essentially. So at the same time, I'm also pregnant, and I'm thinking about the 2020 market season that we're headed into and realizing I'm going to have a newborn standing at a farmer's market. And there's this side of me that is, like, really empowered by that, but there's this other side of me that's like, this isn't sustainable for the rest of our lives. Right now, we can hire a babysitter or we can take the babies along, which that was naive of me to think. We do not take our kids to the market with us. But eventually, like, our kids are going to have a sporting event on a Saturday.
You're going to want your weekends back.
Yeah, I'm going to want to go. I'm going to want to not work every single day. And so the farmers market model is no longer sustainable, and we need to grow. And that's when we decide, like, now the online makes sense. And we're going to look at just starting Iowa, Minnesota shipping. But if we go online and we can reach people, then somebody from Minneapolis can order, somebody from Des Moines can order, and we don't have to go to those markets. We can just ship it to them. And So I started to pay attention to social media, specifically Instagram, and really put the effort in end of 2019. And at the time, there was another woman on social media in agriculture who was very successful at the time. She had 40,000 followers when it was like pretty rare to have that many followers on Instagram. And she was going to launch a specific training for women in agriculture to learn about social media and Instagram. And I wanted to take her course. And it was a big investment. It was, I think I ended up paying a total of like $4,500 with travel and the course and everything else. But I made that investment and went. The course didn't end up happening until like the end of 2020 because COVID.
Whoops.
But it changed for us the whole social media game. Like it definitely made it more of a job, much more strategic. She gave the tools and insights that I needed in order to grow the account in the way I wanted to. And that's when the growth started to happen.
And culminated in you guys being on an Applebee's commercial. Yeah.
Sometimes I think that's pure luck. And what happened was I got home from that training, that social media training, and one of the things that was said in the training was like, you need to be on TikTok. And I did not want to be on TikTok. And at the time on TikTok, pretty much all anybody was doing was dancing. And so we did the viral Applebee's Walker Hayes dance in front of our cattle. And I convinced Knute to do it one night over a bottle of wine. I think it was the second bottle of wine of the night, which is maybe how that happened. And we learned the dance and we go out and we do it. And it didn't get that many views, like 7,000 views, but Applebee's saw it. And we got paid for it. I was like less than a half a second in an Applebee's commercial, but we did it.
I was going to say, it's still a good story. And, you know, you guys have seen some really cool success and some growth with the Reels and the TikTok and all of that. But like you said, it's not as if it just happened.
Right. It was a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. I was going to say, I know that you're on every day. You have, you know, specific themes of what you are talking about, all of that stuff. The other thing that I don't necessarily know that gets discussed when something like that happens, I got to imagine that you found plenty of people that had plenty to say about how you were doing things and specifically how you were doing things wrong.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about that, like how, you know.
Yeah, I don't have hard skin. I'm very soft. I'll be the first to admit that. And Instagram has forced me to get some hard skin. So I kind of went through like this whole different growth stage of Instagram where I came back from that event and I was like gung-ho, Instagram is our future. I'm going to put all my eggs in this basket. And I wanted to get brand deals and sponsorships. And I wanted to be that influencer that got paid to promote other things. And we did that for a while. And then it started to feel really out of alignment, which like I've said that word a lot in the course of this podcast. But I think that's important. Like we're always looking at, does this align with where we want to go? Does it feel right? And if it doesn't, why are we doing it? And so I think the turning point for us was we did a brand partnership with Templeton Whiskey and Knute made a drink. And the whole thing just felt so not us. And why were we talking to our following about somebody else's product when we wanted to sell our own product through these channels? So we got very specific in what types of brands we would work with moving forward. So it became us saying yes to every opportunity that came to our door to now we only say yes to USA made small businesses that we can really feel like make an impact in their business and also something that we use every day or something that is, you know, an area of our passion, like the Iowa economic development. We did a partnership last year to be able to promote Iowa, that aligned. And so we did that. But over the course of this time, as the following is growing, so is the negativity. And one thing that we really built our Instagram around is we're going to be a welcoming place for everyone. We never, ever want to diss somebody else's product to lift ours up. Like if we have to do that, our product is not good enough. It should stand on its own. So we only ever wanted to talk positively about our product, not negatively about somebody else's. In the beef world, that's pretty controversial. The fact that we are raising grass-fed beef and not throwing grain-fed beef under the bus every time we talk about it is shocking to some people and makes some people mad, which I think is so dumb. We have a hard enough job in agriculture that we do not need to villainize each other, and the whole world needs to eat. There's lots of ways to raise food. Anyway, I could get on an entire tangent on that, but yeah, we're getting a lot of negativity from people on all different fronts, whether it's what we're feeding our cattle, whether it's the fact that we're raising animals in the first place. You know, I've definitely gotten death threats related to that I should be murdered like I murder my cattle. Down to the way we look, you know, or the interactions. People watch 2 seconds of something and make a judgment. And it used to really bother me, and it doesn't anymore, but it's because I've set major boundaries and I just block and delete. You just have to.
Right. Well, that's not your core customer. That's not who you want following you. So like, yeah, I have zero time for you. I don't, thanks for the engagement. Thanks for possibly the little algorithm bump, for just being here. But you can also see your way out. Like, it's not.
Exactly. And you'll notice, I mean, if you've followed along for a while, the amount of content that we're putting out there now is a lot less. And I do not focus so much time on it. I mean, there's still tons of time that goes to it, but like yesterday I didn't post, that I'm not going to make myself, I don't feel bad about that. I used to just be distraught that I didn't post yesterday. It happens, and Instagram or social media is one tiny part of our business, and we have all of these other marketing strategies happening in the background that are equally as important, if not more important, than what I post on Instagram for that day. And Instagram could disappear tomorrow. You have to build a business around so many more things than that, because you do not want that to disappear.
Right. So kind of in line with that whole theme, though, did you see the growth, like the online, did it translate into sales growth?
Yes, but not in the way that some would expect. I think some people see people on Instagram that have followers of, 25,000 to 100,000, and they think all of their customers, all of their money comes from those followers. And that's just not true. So for our sales online, our online sales make up like 65% of our business. And of that 65%, 10% of those sales are coming from Instagram. So that's a pretty small portion. I mean, it's still a portion. It's still important. I can't let it go. But only 10% are actually coming from the app. What we see more likely is that somebody finds us on Google or at a farmer's market with the ones we still go to, or a recommendation from a friend, and then they buy something, and then they follow us on Instagram as like this added way to connect with their farmer. But it's not the means through which they're purchasing.
Right. The initial purchase is not organically coming from Instagram as often.
Right.
Which is good.
And, we try and protect our customers in that we have customers that have been with us from the beginning, or that purchase from us very consistently, and maybe they're not on Instagram. And the last thing we want is to just throw out all of these deals and special things to Instagram and not take care of our customers, our reoccurring customers. So we promise our newsletter, our email newsletter subscribers, they get every deal first. They get every update on inventory first. Like nothing just gets announced to Instagram before it goes out to email. So that if we have something, it doesn't sell out on Instagram and then our email people don't get a chance. And we see that happen sometimes where there'll be something so enticing that people will click on Instagram and could sell it out instantly. And so it's always really important to go to those email subscribers first.
Yeah, they're your most invested customers at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so those are your early adopters, and those are the ones you got to take care of, because they're also your biggest word of mouthpiece.
Yes.
They're the most likely to recommend someone else. And so I think that's probably a good plan to make sure that they have the first.
Yeah.
Okay, so then talk to me a little bit about the decision for you. You know, you have Harbor, you end up leaving Iowa State for a different position. You don't go straight full-time back to the job. So talk to me a little bit about that, and then your decision to like finally just be like, all right, I'm a full-time ranch woman. This is me.
So yeah, we have Harbor, and he's almost 4 now,
Which is wild.
Yeah, I know. And we had him in like the heart of COVID. It was May of 2020. I mean, it was a terrifying hospital experience with everything that was going on at the time. But, you know, the benefit that came from all of that is people became more open to working from home. So I'm loving the Iowa State executive MBA job. I still love and miss that job. It was such a fun job working with executives in that space. But it's very unrealistic for me as a mom and a business owner. Grandview Beef is growing, and I'm spending 2.5 hours of my day in a car. And while I can work from home some days, the reality is that that in-person time for an executive MBA is vital. And it's taking place on the weekends. So my Fridays and Saturdays are spent in Ames working when they should be spent with my children, well, with my child at the time, and working on my business. And so I'm like getting torn in all these directions and failing at all of them, you know? And I think that's a feeling that entrepreneurs get a lot. Like they take on too much and then they're not succeeding at any of it. They're just skating by in all of it. And that is the most frustrating feeling. And so it just wasn't sustainable anymore. And there was an opportunity to get a fully remote job, still working in agriculture, promoting the Women in Agribusiness Summit, which is a conference that I had attended 3 years, loved it, and was all about promoting women in ag. And so that really aligned with me. I was heartbroken to leave the Iowa State job, but I did it, and I worked that job remotely. I can't remember. I think it was like 2 years or a year and a half. I'm so bad at years. I need like a timeline in front of me to remember all this stuff. And it was fine. It wasn't like, it didn't ignite any passion in me. And again, I just found myself being pulled, like, I really need to be doing this for Grandview Beef, and I'm over here doing this for somebody else's company. Mm-hmm. And what we kept coming back to and what was holding me in this job was insurance. And then somebody just finally called me out one day and was like, you know, there's hundreds of thousands of people that have figured it out. Have you really done enough research to see if you can figure it out? I'm like, you know what? No, I haven't.
Needed that. Thank you.
I needed a little kick in the butt. And so, you know, and here's Knute over here on this side, like buying more stuff and growing the business. And he just has no fear. And thank goodness, because we would not be where we were if he didn't just push us to grow. But we're continuing to grow. And it's like, okay, I've got 75 animals to market and a full-time job and a baby, and now I'm pregnant with another baby. Like, this is not working. So we just decided that after I had my second, Luella, we had her in September of 2022, that it was time for me to walk away. So I went back to the job and stayed for a while and worked, and then it was March of 2023 when I finally went all in on Grandview Beef. It was terrifying, and I think a lot of people feel that way, but also there was just no other option. It was very clear. We waited until the very last possible moment, and when we pulled the trigger, we knew it was necessary. And there have been so many times since then where I just look back and think, how did we even do this while I was working a full-time job? Because my husband still does work a full-time job. So yeah, now every day is Grandview Beef, and it's full and busy, and I love it. I feel very, very fulfilled.
Yeah, it is a scary leap though. But like you said, looking back, you're like, man, how was I, you know, hindsight's always 20/20, and you see like the deficits and everything that you were, because you didn't have time. You didn't have the bandwidth. You had a toddler and a newborn, and you can only do so much.
Yeah. And I think in this entrepreneurial world, people often read these books or see these stories where somebody like made it big or took this huge, ginormous risk and went all in on themselves. And in reality, what more of our stories are is like these little check-offs of like, okay, if I can do this, then I move to the next step. If I can do this, I move to the next step. You know, we had a savings account of money to get us through that first year because Grandview Beef was still not paying me in 2023. And luckily, 2024, I took my first Grandview Beef paycheck ever, and I'm paying myself every month. And the reward in that is just, it's so awesome. But we're in year 7 of our business. And I think that it's really easy for people to read these books or see these stories and think like, oh, well, I just can't do that because it's just not possible for me. That's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Well, it doesn't have to look like that. It can be small steps along the way to get you to your end goal.
Right. And still end up building something substantial, you know, something
Yes.
that is, it feeds your family kind of a thing.
Yes.
So, okay, we are currently sitting in your warehouse, which
Yeah.
this was another one of those Knute just went out and spent some money.
He
situation.
did.
Sensing a theme. So you move into this warehouse, you buy this giant freezer that you had not intended on purchasing yet. Like, talk to me a little bit about how that all evolved from going from your 1 cooler of beef that you brought to your first farmer's market to this.
Yeah. So the world is shutting down in 2020 and we have a new baby. And Knute brings me to this warehouse, which is big, very big, and says, I need to buy this for my day job. And his day job, which will shock a lot of people, is he's a Pioneer Seed salesman representative. Like, we raise grass-fed beef and my husband sells Pioneer corn. And he needed a warehouse to store his seed products. And we just couldn't find one. And every door that we kept looking through kept getting shut. And this was Illinois Seed Foundation building. And when COVID happened, they decided to get out. And Knute just heard about it through the right people before it got listed. But it was like we need to make a decision now type of thing. And so to be honest with you, I don't even know if he asked me before he bought it. I think he might have just bought it.
Said, hey, honey.
Or he might have taken me here afterwards, after he bought it. But it's this huge space, and there's office space on the other side of the building. And so pretty quickly we realized we need a tenant that can fill this space because we do not need this amount of office space. So there we fixed the money problem. We get a tenant. And so they have one half of the building. Knute stores a seat on the other side. But I need a place to ship our beef because the beef business is continuing to grow. Online sales are growing. At this time, now we're shipping to the Midwest, anywhere that speedy delivery service will deliver. And so one of the reasons we were actually interested in this building is there was a refrigeration unit in it already. And here we are naive thinking we just saved ourselves so much money. We're going to use this refrigeration unit, convert it into a freezer for beef. Buy the building. Can't do that. Yeah, you cannot use a refrigeration unit and convert it to freezer because things swell and cracks. And so we have to sell the refrigeration unit and buy a freezer. The reason that we needed a freezer was because we were continuing to grow. But of course, we can't just sell all the beef at one time. We have to sell it throughout the year, and we needed a place to store it. And where we had been storing it was in 5 chest freezers in our garage, which was legal. We had the right licenses for that, but it just wasn't sustainable. Again, we've reached this point in our business where it's this is not working anymore. And so we needed a freezer. We purchased this freezer using the farm storage loan program at a time, 2020, interest rates were incredibly low. I think we lucked out in a lot of ways with our purchases and investments that we made because they were around that 2020 timeframe. And while I was really scared at the time, Knute had I don't know if it's just lack of fear or if you could call it really business sense, but he wanted to take the risks. And so we were getting these loans for the building, for the freezer when interest rates were really low.
Yeah. Okay, so but then just add those zeros to, to the loan pile that you never wanted.
Yeah.
It's fine. I think at that point you're probably
I'm like, what's $50,000 more?
What's
sure,
next?
let's build a freezer.
Yeah. And, for long-term growth plans, it does end up setting you up for, having some capacity as you keep moving. So all in all, Knute, you were probably right.
Yes. Yeah, he was.
It just maybe takes a little bit to wrap your arms around it, perhaps. Mm-hmm. So then the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is sort of a new thing last year that you guys launched, shall we say, and you are growing it this year, is your farm to table event and experience. So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, where did the idea for that come up? Like, how did that start?
Yeah. So when I first was visiting the farm, and we talked about this earlier, I had all these assumptions that were not true. And it did not take very long for me to see that. And that was a real eye-opening experience for me, in that if everybody in their lifetime was just required to step foot on a farm for a couple hours, they would think so differently about the world. But they're not required to do that, nor do they seek out that opportunity. Because farms are associated with lots of things that are unattractive to people, like flies and poop and dirt and all things that I was afraid of when I moved to the farm. And so one of the things that we've been really passionate about with Grandview Beef is that we're not just selling beef, but we're trying to educate people in agriculture in a very welcoming way. Not like a forceful, learn about our industry, but more like, hey, if you want to learn, ask us any question and we're open to it. But we wanted to do that on the farm and get people actually with their feet on the ground. And it's unrealistic for us to do tours because we can't just have people dropping by, and we don't have the labor for that. But there was this idea in our back of our heads of agro-tourism and doing some farm-to-table dinners. Part of that came from where we got married in Italy was an agroturismo, and they did it right. Like, they grew all of their produce, all of their meat on the farm, even the olives for the olive oil, and then they made these extravagant, delicious meals with this beautiful backdrop, and they just knew what they were doing, and that was very attractive to us. And so for years we wanted to do some sort of farm-to-table dinner and kind of combine our passion of hospitality and hosting people with our business of beef. But we always found excuses to not do it. And I told Knute when I quit my job in 2023, I will not make an excuse this year. We will do a dinner. And so we did. And it was just 36 seats one night in September. And we sold out within a couple weeks of launching the tickets. And it was just a really great experience. We loved it. The people that came loved it. They gave us all sorts of wonderful feedback and reviews on all the reasons why they loved it and what we should repeat, improvements that we could make. Truthfully, on the backside of things, we lost a crap ton of money. Like, I was hoping to break even, and we lost so much money on it that when I went and looked at it for this year, it was like, okay, we want to do this again because we loved it so much, but also it has to make financial sense for us, and this has to be adding revenue to the farm, not taking away. Because another attractive thing about it was, let's diversify our revenue streams and not just be solely the beef people, because what if something happens to the herd? All of these future scenarios, we could protect ourselves if we had more revenue streams. So this year we're doing it again. We are set to make money. And we decided to kind of go all in and host 4 this year, 40 seats at each. And I'll be honest, I launched tickets and I had a lot of confidence that it would like instantly sell out, or at least some of them would. And that's not been the case. And then I just did some math and I was like, okay, 40 times 4. Oh, 160 people? That's like a lot of people to expect to buy tickets to something in the middle of rural Iowa with no hotels or resources nearby. But we're slowly selling the tickets. Our first dinner is almost sold out. Our last dinner is almost sold out, and there's some available tickets to the two in the middle. So
yeah. So talk to me a little bit about, because I saw the pictures of it. It was gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
The food looked delicious. But so you say we lost our butts on this.
Yeah.
So like, what are some of the things behind the scenes that like maybe people who attended, it was a great experience. We loved it. We want to come back. We probably bought repeat tickets. But what were some of the things that maybe you didn't realize were going to be the investments that needed to be made to put on an event like this? Like what was it? Did you have to do licensing fees? Like I assume you had to have a chef come in. Like what was it? What were the things that were not seen?
Yeah. So one of the things that I really didn't think about was that we are a working farm, and not every aspect of our farm is pretty or like made for large groups of people. So when we started to get ready for the dinner in the summer, Knute was like, we have not put gravel down in our driveway for years since we moved here, and we need gravel. And so all of a sudden we're like buying loads of gravel. I'm like, how does this have anything to do with a farm to table dinner? And I'm sure the people walking on that gravel weren't like, oh, this is $3,000 worth of gravel under my feet. But it is. And we didn't have tables and chairs, and we live an hour and a half away from a place where you can rent those. So it didn't make sense to rent them if we were going to move into doing these in the future. So we bought chairs. We bought all the materials for tables and had custom tables built and welded. We needed every type of thing that you could think of that was on the table. We had to buy that. And the chef brought last year her own utensils and plates and cups. Well, that added cost. And so by the time all the bills were said and done, like the charges that we got, we lost. And then that was even with us lucking out with beautiful, perfect weather. And so as we went into this year, we needed to think of investments that we could make that would set us up better for long term. So like we purchased a tent in case it rains or it's too hot. Now we actually have a place to put people. And then we purchased all the cutlery and plates so that we don't have to pay the rental fees to the chef for doing that. We actually negotiated rates with chefs rather than just letting the chef tell us how much they cost. So a big learning curve, but we're going to do it.
And so like the chef takes care of the rest of it though, right? Do you do you know what I'm saying? Like, do you approach the chef and you're like, hey, we want to do this? Like you're not a restaurant. So like you don't have to have a licensed location necessarily, but you have to go seek out these chefs is that how that works?
Yeah. So it's a great point, and it's a great, it was an added cost for us. So the chef last year brought her own staff. And part of that was that Knute and I wanted to sit at the table and really enjoy our first farm to table. On our farm, we're hosting all these people, we want to sit. And I think we just didn't understand that we could have enjoyed it standing up and serving, rather than sitting. But that was a big learning experience for us. So we paid for her to bring all the labor. And that was really fun and great, but it's a lot more affordable for us to do the labor. So, we have a full-time staff member who's on salary. We have an intern who's on salary. And so we can have them dedicate hours that week to that meal and not have to pay them anything extra. And it's an awesome experience for them. Knute and I can work it. And so this year, it's a lot different in that we just pay the chef for their labor and a reimbursement of ingredients. They have the freedom to do whatever they want. They use our beef. They don't have to pay for our beef. We give them the beef. And if they want to bring somebody along like a sous chef, they can, but it comes out of their salary. And then we do the rest of it. And what's really fun about that is that, yes, we have our 4 standard team members, but we also have family and friends that want to help and want to be a part of it. And so you'll see a lot of faces around the farm this year that are just our friends and community who've decided to show up, work for free, and support us.
Yeah. And it's not something like making them go stand at a farmer's market for 5 hours kind of thing and sling your beef. It is a beautiful experience that, you, like you said, you can get some faces that are, connected one way or another, and they just want to be a part of it.
Right. And what we found when we sat at the table was we only really got solid conversations with the people that we were sitting next to. And we'd much rather be walking around serving and pouring water so that we can chat with each individual person, because it means a lot to us that somebody buys that ticket, gets the babysitter, comes for the night, and does that. And so we know it's a lot to ask to come to Clarion, and we want to interact with them face to face. And it'll be so much easier to do that when we're not sitting at the table eating.
Right. Even though I'm sure the food was delicious.
I know. I'm going to ask the chef to make sure that he has some for all of the workers as well.
Some extra plates.
Yeah.
So you guys can have them in the background. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So as you look forward to the next 12 months, what are you most excited about? It can be personal. It can be Grandview beef.
I think that we are at a real turning point where, as Knute puts it, we have a tiger by the tail. So we kind of feel like the world's our oyster as far as growth goes, and we just have to decide how we want to grow. But we're making some really big decisions about growth that will require more team members and more strategic thinking and investments, and all of that is really scary, but it's also exciting. And we're looking at ways to expand our footprint through different product lines and things that could get us on more shelves. And so as we think about those things, it excites me because we feel like the world's our oyster and we can do whatever we want, but we don't have to do anything at all if we don't want to. like Grandview Beef is finally profitable. And transparently, part of that is that we've received some grants. So those grants are helping us. But for the first time, we're like going to have money left at the end of the year that we can decide how we want to reinvest that back into the business. And to have all those opportunities laying out in front of us and knowing that we get to choose what aligns for us best, that's exciting. Like, nobody is telling us what to do. That's our choice.
And you also don't, like you said, you don't have to. You have all of these options, but it's comforting to be like, oh, okay, maybe let's just take a beat. Let's just hang out and just see what aligns. It doesn't, maybe it feels like it aligns because we're going 15 million miles an hour in 17 different directions. And you're like, oh, that direction sounds good. But, you have the ability to just pause for a second, which I think is really cool.
And we built this foundation that can carry us through, right? So like we can try these new things and grow in these different ways, but we still have these orders coming in every week. And for so long, I just would like lay in bed at night worried about if I'd have any orders to ship. We went from shipping one box every few weeks and just like freaking out anytime an order came in because finally we got another one, to now consistently, 20 boxes going out every week without us sending an email or doing a special promotion. And then on the weeks that we do those things, the orders increase even more. But we have consistency in orders across every single week. And that's a really good feeling.
Yeah. You can project, you can forecast.
Yes, right?
Must be nice for the financial person to be able to forecast some sort of an income. Yes. Okay. If people want to follow along, if they want to buy your beef, if they, want to get in contact with you, where should they go?
Yeah. So our website is grandviewbeef.com. And then our Instagram is grandviewbeef. And they can follow along. I do try to be on there every day. And Knute takes over on Fridays. That's something really fun that we do where he shares his side of the business on Fridays. And it's kind of like the wild, wild west. Like I never know what he's going to do or say. But yeah, it's a great way just to get to know us and follow along. And then like we've talked about so many times on here today, we want to be welcoming and open. So no question is stupid or wrong. We want people to reach out to us. We want to be a resource. We're just here to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and chat with me.
Thank you for coming to Clarion.
Of course. No problem.